Hello everyone, welcome back. So apparently many of you liked the video I made about deciphering the Phyrexian language, and then you are in luck because there's a lot more where that came from. And in this video we are going to focus more in the grammar of the language than in the phonetics. Why? Because of teamwork. You see, all of these people that I mentioned in the previous video that worked to decipher some old forgotten language, none of them worked alone. Take for example Alice Cover. She looked at a lot of examples of linear B, and she would classify all of these repeated symbols, and she would use statistics to try to figure out what part of speech they were. But in the end, it was Michael Ventris who took all the work that Alice had done, and he was able to use it to finally find names for places and names for people. And using that, he was able to decode the entire linear B script, and he discovered that it was a kind of ancient Greek. And that's amazing because science is teamwork. Despite the fact that they never met each other, they were working in the same team for the same goal. And we are in a very similar situation because, of course, we are not the first people to try to decipher the Phyrexian language. So this is our team. It turns out that a lot of fans over the years have looked at the Phyrexian language, every single example we have, and they have tried to translate it. And it's been like 10 years or more, so of course they have done quite a bit of progress. Here we have many examples of, pretty much every example of Phyrexian with a rough word-by-word translation and the known English equivalent when we have it. And as far as I can tell, most of this came from this forum. Let me show you that user just to give them credit. Here, this user is giving us a summary of pretty much everything they had discovered of Phyrexian. Like words and sentence structure and all that stuff. And this is great because that means that if we already have all of this, we can try to use all of this knowledge to try to decipher not just the words, but the grammar of the language. And I thought about making a video where I would try to show you how I became convinced that these translations are trustworthy, but it was very boring. I would just look at this word-by-word translation and try to look for inconsistencies or try to look for words I already knew and find and see if they were where I would expect them to find them based on these word-by-word translations. But most of the time they hold. But anyway, let's move on. Let's try to decipher the grammar of the Phyrexian language. And for that, in this case, we are going to use two main examples in this video. We are going to look at Jack Mott's Testament. This is a playtest card. This is not an official card. Sometimes the people that create the game, they made these test cards, but they still want to show it to the fans, and so they share it on the internet. And so we have this text, and we have the non-English equivalent. And we also have this card for Elish Norn. And we also have the non-English equivalent for this one. And what we're going to do with this text is that we're going to look for words that repeat. If we can find the same word in two different situations, in two different contexts, we can see if they are the same, if they are different. If they are different, we can try to speculate why are they different. Now, we are not going to discover too much in this video about the phonetics, about how to actually speak Phyrexian. But we don't actually need it, because think about it, millions of people in the world are deaf, they cannot hear at all, and yet they routinely learn to read and write. And so my point is, you don't really need to know how a language sounds in order to decipher it. It's just, it helps, it certainly helps, but it's not necessary. And so in this video, we're not going to be focusing pretty much at all on the phonetics. And if you're confused, like how can we decipher a language without knowing how it sounds, just keep watching. For example, here in the card for Jack Mott, in Jack Mott's Testament, we find two instances of the word card, and one is plural and the other is singular. And they are slightly different. Now, this didn't need to be the case, because not all languages mark the plural. For example, in Japanese doesn't have plural. And there are many languages that have plural and paucal and dual and like a lot of ways to specify if you have exactly 2 of something or more than 20 of something or stuff like that. But anyway, so it seems that the difference between these two, because most of the symbols are exactly the same, except for this one. So here we have something that we have identified as a vowel symbol, and here we have something else. I don't know what the hell this is. This looks like a vowel, but it just not quite, like it goes to the other side. We have never seen anything like this, and there's nothing like this in any of the other examples. But it kind of looks like the same vowel twice, kind of. So that's interesting, because yeah, I mean, that would mean that Phyrexian maybe marks the plural by doing something to the vowels. Okay, so that's interesting. And then I want to look at another example. Here we have two instances of the word put. This also comes from Jack Mott's Testament, and they come from slightly different contexts. Here in the English translation, it is saying that if something happens, if a card would be put somewhere, so this is a conditional, and it tells you if that would happen, then put it this. And this is an order. So you can see that the context is different, and yet these words are pretty much the same, except for this. It is kind of like the same symbol, but is facing in opposite directions. So maybe what's happening is that these vowels are marking somehow the irrealis in this case, like, because it's talking if that happens, that's a hypothetical situation. That's an irrealis or a subjunctive. That's something that we use a lot in Spanish. Spanish is my native language. Or maybe the one that is different is the second one, because here is giving the player an order. If that happens, then you have to put it X and Y. And so that's very interesting. So maybe this is an order. But whatever this is, it is certainly non-concatenative morphology. But what does that mean? Don't worry, you use it all the time. Take, for example, take and love. When you conjugate these verbs to past tense, take becomes took and love becomes loved. And you can hear them in the International Phonetic Alphabet. Maybe I got the vowels wrong, but like the vowels are my weak point. But the point is that you can see that, for example, in the case of love, all that happened is that the root of the verb stayed the same, and you just added a D. You concatenated another sound. This is concatenative morphology. But in the case of take, the consonants stayed the same, and what changed was the vowel in between them. You did not concatenate anything. This is non-concatenative morphology. And as you can see, English uses both of them. And in fact, pretty much all languages use both kinds of morphologies in some degree. Some use one kind of morphology more than the other ones. But this is very interesting, because this is telling us that how Phyrexian uses that. Apparently, it uses that for marking plurals and maybe with verbs. Let's keep looking for more examples. Here we get two instances of the word creatures from the card of Norn. And they might look very different, but then let me just do this. And you will see that below this orange line, they are identical. And they are not just identical, they also have this doubled consonant, vowel symbol. Okay, there is this slight difference at the beginning, but maybe that comes from the context. Here is talking about creatures that you control, that the player controls, and here is talking about cards that the opponent controls. And if you know about Phyrexian, probably you are recognizing this as the present tense marker. And you're right, this is the present tense marker. But in all other instances, when this is used to mark a tense, it always comes followed by the space marker. This separates. This is the space between words, but it doesn't appear here, and it appears with the word creatures. So this different context makes me think that these symbols do mean something else in this context. Like, for example, how the word mean can mean that you are very mean, or it can mean that you mean what you mean. You know what I mean? The point is that the same symbols, the same sounds can have different contexts, can have different meanings in different contexts. But none of what we've seen confirms that this is like a plural marker. If we could only find an instance of the word creature used in singular, well, in the card of Norn, the card tells us that it is a legendary creature, singular. And again, this looks weird, but below this orange line, you can see that they are pretty much the same thing. There are some differences, but let's address what's going on here at the beginning. What is this thing? Maybe Phyrexian is a language that is a little bit agglutinative, like German. German likes to combine small words to make larger words. So maybe here Phyrexian is combining the words for legendary and creature to make a single word for a legendary creature. But the more interesting part is that here, well, we have these repeated vowels. Here we have it only once. And it is a singular. Here is creatures, plural, and here is legendary creature, singular. So this is giving a lot of weight to our hypothesis that this is how the plural is marked in Phyrexian. But also I want to point out that we have this symbol here in creatures, which is like this, but here with legendary creature, it is slightly different. And I'm not sure what's going on here. And I said I wouldn't get too much into phonetics, but just listen to me. What's going on here is I think this reminds me to the mutations that happen in Irish. You see, for example, this is the word for family, clan, and this is here is written in the International Phonetic Alphabet. But then, if I want to say my family, mo clan, the word changes. The voiced velar stop changes to unvoiced velar stop changes to an unvoiced velar fricative. Clan, 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 clan. And so, yeah, I mean, I'm not sure. And I mean, we don't have too much evidence that this is what's going on, but this is what I suspect is going on in this case. Anyway, let's move on to another example. Here we have the word for opponents. And once again, we find a duplicated vowel symbol. This is very interesting. And it is just confirming what we think. Then we have two instances of the word controlled. This one also comes from the Election Horn card. And here it is talking about the creatures that you control. And here it is talking about creatures that your opponents control. And they are pretty much the same, but there are some small differences in these vowels, and there is an extra consonant. So what could this mean? Well, maybe this means the English doesn't encode too much information about the subject in the verbs, but maybe Phyrexian does. Maybe when you write a controlled like this, it means that it's done by you or by us. And maybe this means that something is controlled by someone else, by a third person plural or singular. Or maybe it is marking some plural or singular of the things that are controlled. I mean, this is one of the many things that we are not going to know at this point. This is just another interesting observation. But the point is that, look, this is more non-concatenative morphology. The vowels are changing to mean different things. And there might be some small instance of concatenative morphology with this extra consonant here. Another interesting example is the word other. And we find it in two separate instances. And they are different. And as you can see, this one has this thing that we are recognizing as the plural, and this one as a singular. But you might be thinking, like, that doesn't make sense. Like if I say other friend or other friends, other doesn't changes, right? But take, for example, what happens in Spanish. If I want to say otras amigas, other female friends, it's pretty much the same as in English. You can see that the word friends, amigos, is in plural, and the plural is marked exactly the same way as in English, with an S at the end. But look that the word for other, otros, is also plural, and not just that, because this word is female, amigas, female friends, the adjective also has to be female. So what happens is that in Spanish, adjectives always have to match their nouns in number and gender. Actually, when I was learning English, I would always match that. I would say others' friends. And my teacher would like, no, you're wrong. And for me, it was very hard to understand why that was wrong. But anyway, so maybe what's going on is that in Phyrexian, adjectives do match the nouns they are modifying. Even more because this one is before other cards, plural. This one was before other cards. And this one was before other card, so which is singular. So it makes perfect sense that one is singular and the other one is plural. And that's very good. Now we know that in Phyrexian, probably, seems very likely, adjectives match the nouns, at least in number. It also works for proper names. For example, this is a proper name that I forgot to include in the previous video, Gitaxians. And again, you can see this duplicated vowel here. And this comes from the flavor text of the card of Eleshnorn. And then we have this other example for other worlds. And yeah, this is another one of those examples of maybe some degree of agglutination, because it is apparently a single word. There is no, that we don't see this symbol that separates words. But we can recognize that this is the word for other that we have seen before, and then this has to mean worlds. And here's the thing, this is very cool. We started guessing things about phonology, right? And that helped us discover what were the symbols for vowels and consonants. And now we are using that knowledge about the phonetics to try to find out things about the grammar. Because when we see that the symbol for the vowels are repeated, we can say like, oh, well, maybe this is marking the plural. But now, this knowledge about grammar is going to help us get some more knowledge about phonetics. And this is how it works. Like, you keep making guesses, and these guesses lead you to more guesses, and eventually you are right. Because check it out. In this word for worlds, which we are told by the translation is plural, like in the official English translation, it tells about other worlds, and we have a repeated circle symbol. That this makes me think that this circle symbol is some kind of vowel, because it is being repeated in a word that is plural. And this is so cool, because it shows you how, well, deciphering a language is just a bunch of guesses, and if your guesses keep holding on, and it helps you to decipher even more things. But wait a minute. Remember our first example with card and cards? What was going on with this symbol here? Like, we never found out what's going on here. Well, this is gonna sound very weird, but I think that whomever wrote that card made a mistake. And that might sound crazy, that this is a language I don't even know. Obviously, the person who wrote Jacmot's Testament knew what he was doing when he wrote these vowels. But here's the thing. I read this book called the Mystery of the Hittites, and there the author starts explaining how archaeologists have to look at all of these government documents, and sometimes looking at them we find orthographic mistakes, spelling mistakes that the scribes did. And it's crazy that we can correct the spelling of people that lived 4,000 years ago, of languages we don't even speak. But it makes sense, because archaeologists and linguists spent years looking at this text, while the scribes that wrote them, well, they just were like, okay, so you bought such and such, or like, this is just a government document, and then they put it away and never looked at it again. And so it makes sense that some mistakes went by and they didn't notice. So it seems to me that whomever wrote Jacmot's Testament did a small mistake, and that instead of this symbol being like this, maybe it should have been only like this. This makes a lot more sense based on everything we have seen so far. And this is amazing, because even though there are so many things we don't know about Phyrexian, we know, or we can be pretty certain that this was a mistake, and we can correct it. And okay, so let's just give a summary of what we learned today. We learned that Phyrexian has a plural, and we are pretty sure of how it works. We learned that Phyrexian has non-concatenative morphology, maybe for the verbs, like the example with put, and definitely with the nouns to mark the plural. We learned that the adjectives match the nouns in that number, and we learned that the mechanism is the same, with this same non-concatenative morphology. And we learned that this symbol that we had never seen before is probably a vowel. Anyway, so in the next video, I think we're gonna be looking at some verbs. Perhaps I'm gonna try to catalog all the tense markers we have seen so far, and other stuff like that. Or I don't know, maybe we will look at the card. I mean, the card for boring clicks has so much text. There's so much we can learn from that one. Anyway, there's a lot more to learn. And just if you want to keep deciphering the Phyrexian language, please subscribe and give me a like. And if you have done some work on this, if you have some guesses or something, please let me know. This is all teamwork. We are just working together here. Yeah, anyway, thanks for watching.